The following is an audiophonic baseball experience. Stoveminders. The hot stove? It's hot! It's been a lot of deals going down this past week. I love it, but I was kind of hoping to wait till the winter meetings this Monday to run through them, but they just keep coming through. The teams keep making moves, all these trades going down. It's madness. But you know what? That's great, because I love talking about this stuff. I also want to give a shout out before we start to the Galley Gang, as well as the Bauer Boys, aka the Bowies, and of course the Baby Talkers. Well, a litany of moves have gone down this past week. A lot of trades, some signings as well. And of course, the non-tender deadline came through, which only means there are more free agents for teams to choose from. I'm going to go through all of it, and starting off with the biggest signing of this past week, of this hot stove so far actually, and that's right-hander, starting pitcher, Zack Wheeler, 5 years, $118 million. He's going to the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, you likely remember at the start of last year's hot stove, Phillies owner John Middleton said they were going to spend stupid money in order to build a competitive team. And they did that. They gave an astronomical contract to Bryce Harper. They also dished out contracts to Andrew McCutchen and David Robertson, not to mention those big trades they pulled off to acquire JT Realmuto and Jean Segura. Those are some big names that just sit there, and that's adding on top of the decent foundation they had beforehand with guys like Aaron Nola and Scott Kingery and Rhys Hoskins. And despite all that, the Phillies went 81-81, didn't even make the playoffs, didn't even have a winning record. And safe to say, it was going to be an interesting offseason. You know, were they going to blow it up after 1 year? Or were they going to spend some more stupid money? Seems like the latter. What went wrong? Well, McCutchen missed most of the season due to injury. Robertson missed most of the season due to injury. Longtime center fielder Odubel Herrera got hit with a domestic violence charge. His career is now in purgatory. And the Phillies rotation was bad. Pretty much every single one of their starters took a step back last season. Aaron Nola did alright. Zach Eflin was okay, but then Jake Arrieta, bad. Vince Velasquez and Nick Pivetta, clearly they needed a little bit of reinforcement on the starting pitching front. So Philadelphia went after one of those sort of tier 2 free agent starters, and they acquired Zack Wheeler, formerly of the division competitors, rivals, New York Mets. Now, Wheeler's had kind of a weird career. He came into the league with a good amount of hype because of his really good stuff, his velocity, his spin rate, and all that. And his stuff is still there, but he suffered a lot of injuries along the way. In fact, he missed all of 2016, recovering from Tommy John surgery, and he didn't pitch a lot in 2017 either. And before that, his numbers were not exactly great. Well, looking at his last 2 seasons, the guy can pitch, you know. His 2018 was better than 19, but either way, his ERA has been below 4. His FIP has been below 3.5. He's almost got a strikeout per inning average. He's clearly a guy who can fit into that number 3 or number 2 spot in the rotation, depending on the team. Definitely not a bad addition for pretty much any club. A couple things to note here, contract-wise. On one hand, it's a huge raise for Wheeler, who made just under $6 million last year in New York. He's going to be earning an average of $23.6 million over the next 5 years. And then there's the fact that this deal is kind of a litmus test for the free agent starting pitching market as a whole, particularly for this crop of second-tier starters. Guys like Madison Bumgarner, Hyun-Jin Ryu, and Dallas Keuchel all can feel confident in the fact that they're probably going to earn around or more than $20 million a year on their next contract. Not to mention the big tickets, Garrett Cole and Steven Strasburg. They're going to be making like over $30 million a year next season, for sure. As for the Phillies, this raises their active team payroll to about $137 million, which is now good for 10th in the majors. So, congratulations. And Phillies fans, don't feel bad that your team is underperforming with that much money, because the Rockies and the Angels have more money committed at the moment than the Phillies. And neither of those teams are even at 500 last season. And while that is a high payroll, it does leave the Phillies with some room to sign some more guys. And that's becoming very relevant considering not just their needs in, let's say, the bullpen, but now their new needs in the infield. Well, the non-tender trade deadline passed recently. A bunch of guys weren't given new contracts and are now free agents. Among them are two Phillies starting infielders, third baseman Pham-Renfroe and second baseman Cesar Hernandez. Now, usually with the non-tender, it's because their projected arbitration salary is higher than what the team is willing to pay, and it's high enough so that the team thinks that they'll be a hard asset to trade. As far as Franco, this makes a lot of sense. This guy's kind of been a bust. Cesar Hernandez, though, he's been good in the recent past, and even last season he batted .279, .333 on base. I was kind of surprised that he got non-tendered, but I guess that's for other teams to gain. The Phillies don't necessarily have any intriguing in-house options. I guess they could move Kingery back to second from center field, but as I mentioned, the Herrera situation's kind of iffy. And yeah, they did sign Josh Harrison to a minor league deal, but there's really no guarantee he's going to revert back to the quality player he was a few years ago. He was ass last season in Detroit, so that's just kind of a low-risk gamble. But yeah, that's what the Phillies are up to so far. Zack Wheeler, 5 years, $118 million. Oh, and one last thing I wanted to say. A couple more last things I wanted to say. Number one is apparently the Chicago White Sox had a bigger contract on offer for Wheeler, but he said no, which sucks for the White Sox because they're starting to build something of a good team. Apparently, Wheeler's fiance is from New Jersey, and particularly near Philadelphia, so family ties, huh? Remember when the White Sox tried to do that whole family tie thing last season when they acquired all of Manny Machado's friends, Pedro Alvarez, and they're hoping Machado was going to come to the South Side, and he didn't. Yeah, it's tough following the White Sox. And the other thing I wanted to mention about Wheeler were his stats at Citizens Bank Park. I saw some commenters saying that, Wheeler, he was playing in a pitcher-friendly park in New York, even though he had a bad defense. It might even get worse playing at a hitter-friendly Citizens Bank. Well, in 44 innings in Philadelphia in his career thus far, Wheeler has managed a .327 ERA and a WHIP below 1. So I wouldn't be worried. I would be a little worried as far as the fact this is kind of a high-risk, high-reward situation. This is a big salary for a guy who, despite his hype, despite his stuff, has never really turned in, an excellent season or anything like that. Where are the results? And I mean that for the Phillies as a whole. So in a way, this is a very Phillies contract. We'll have to see whether or not it pays off and whether or not this Philadelphia ball club can get it together in 2020. Well, the other big contract that got inked this past week has to do with third baseman Mike Moustakas, who's going over to Cincinnati on a 4-year deal worth $64 million. Reds are a team that last year's hot stove, kind of out of nowhere, they just cranked it up. They pulled off that big Homer Bailey salary dump in exchange for a trio of intriguing rental pieces from the Dodgers. They ended up flipping one of those pieces, Yasiel Puig, in exchange for Trevor Bauer. And they bolstered their rotation with the additions of Tanner Roark and Sonny Gray. And with that roster, they won the 2019 and they made some noise. And even now, this is a ball club with a good lineup. Eugenio Suarez, looking really good. Aristides Aquino had a huge rookie season, and top prospect Nick Senzel is now also in the majors. Not to mention Luis Castillo, who's got to be one of the most underrated starting pitchers in baseball at the moment. Maybe not anymore. But despite that good performance and those good pieces on the roster, there is a chance for a little bit of regression. Aquino and Senzel are going into their sophomore campaigns. Bauer wasn't exactly at his best last season. Toronto's very own Joey Votto is declining. So the Reds decided to bring in Moustakas, a guy who's been quite consistent in his career, somebody who could definitely provide some stability to this lineup. He's a solid 250 hitter. He's good for 20-plus home runs. He's a 3-time All-Star. You know what you're going to get with the dude. And for $16 million a year on average, you know what? That's a fair deal, particularly for a Reds team that hasn't been willing to spend a lot of money in free agency recently. Like I mentioned, all those moves they made, most of the big moves have been via trade. I guess they did give an extension to Raisel Iglesias, but even that wasn't like a huge money deal considering Iglesias is a closer. One thing that kind of doesn't make sense about this trade is the position aspect of it. Moustakas has been a third baseman for the vast majority of his career. In fact, prior to 2019, Moustakas had played third base and 4 games at first, and that was it. But the Brewers were like, you know what, let's give this guy a try at second base. And it went okay. And apparently the Reds want to try Moose over at second as well, maybe at a full-time role, considering that Suarez is over there at third base. And you also got to consider the fact that one of the Reds' high-rated prospects, Jonathan India, is a third baseman. And Moustakas is here on a 4-year deal. So here's some questions that the Reds are going to have to mess with a little bit down the line. But for now, it seems like the Reds are going to be fielding Mike Moustakas at second base on opening day. Once again, as I said, a good move, 4 years, $64 million for a solid, consistent hitter and a solid, consistent field. And hey, the NL Central's kind of in flux. Like, there's a lot of question marks around the Brewers, the Cardinals, and the Cubs. And I mean, the Pirates are committed to playing garbage. So the Reds, they might be making some noise again in 2020. Well, one team that's been banging on the drawers and clanging together pots, figuratively speaking, ever since last year's hot stove, or actually even the one before that, is the San Diego Padres. GM AJ Preller has been very active, making all sorts of moves. Eric Hosmer, Manny Machado, so forth. A lot of highly regarded prospects coming up too. Well, they've already been active in this year's hot stove, and this past week, they made a few more moves. Big one here, the biggest trade of this past week, has got to be the acquisition of Tommy Pham by the Padres in exchange for an outfielder of their own, Hunter Renfroe. And they and the Rays also exchanged infield prospects. I'll get to them in a second. Last episode, I was harping on about how the Padres have too many outfielders and how they got to trade one of these guys. Well, trading an outfielder for an outfielder isn't exactly productive, but I will say Pham definitely looks better than Renfroe. In 2019, Pham batted .273, which is right around his career average, with a .818 OPS. He's hit more than 20 home runs in 3 straight seasons. And last year, he set career highs in doubles with 33 and stolen bases with 25, which actually tied a career high. And he also had 68 RBIs, just for good measure. Pham has played a lot in both left field and center field. This guy, in 6 major league seasons, has 6 errors. Ridiculous. Pham has 2 more years under contract via arbitration. He's projected to earn $8.6 million next season, which is more than double what Renfroe was projected to earn. But hey, the Padres, they're trying to win here. They're not like the Rays, who are playing Moneyball and selling off everybody as soon as they can to maintain not spending anything. Look how that's worked out for the Athletics. look at how it's working out for the Rays. I don't know how many Tampa Bay fans there are, but man, I would be upset. Like, as soon as this team starts to play really, really well, it's like, oh, yo, let's start trading all our assets. It's what the Athletics have been doing. Now it's what the Rays are doing. Great work. But hey, you know what? Let's not undersell Mr. Hunter Renfroe here. This guy is a heck of a power hitter. He hit 33 home runs in 2019. He had 26 in both of the previous 2 seasons. However, last season he also batted .219 with a .289 on-base percentage. Not to mention 154 strikeouts in 140 games. The dude is just a pure slugger. But actually, he's a good outfielder. In fact, he's a better outfielder than Pham. Yeah, I know the guy's only 6 errors, but if you look at his other career metrics and such, Pham's he's kind of average or lower. Renfroe, on the other hand, well, in 2019, he had 22 defensive runs saved, playing the corner outfield spots, and a little bit of center as well, with just 2 errors. So, a worthwhile addition despite his faults. He's under control for 4 years, and he's projected to earn just $3.4 million. So, in a way, a good move for the Rays, considering that they're constantly trying to cut costs. But if I had to choose between Pham and Renfroe, I would choose Tommy Pham. So I'm giving this one to San Diego. But this does not change the fact that the Padres have way too many outfielders. What are they going to do? Well, as I mentioned, Pham has played mostly left field and center. Manuel Margot seems to be doing all right in center, but I guess Pham could slot into left field, where the Padres mostly had Will Myers last season. Maybe he can move over to right field, which seems to be open at the moment. But that doesn't take away the fact this team also has Franchy Cordero. They just acquired Trent Grisham. And they have Taylor Trammell lurking in the minors. You know, winter meetings are just around the corner, and they're in San Diego. So maybe AJ Prowers are like, you know what, let's try to ship out another one of these guys. As for Renfroe, he could probably slide into left field in Tampa Bay, where Pham was mostly playing last season. Now, it's not just those 2 guys in the trade. I mentioned there were a pair of prospects being exchanged, and both these guys are pretty interesting. The Padres are getting a gentleman by the name of Jake Cronenworth. He is a 25-year-old, soon-to-be 26-year-old, actually, left-handed batter out of St. Clair, Michigan. He's played as high as AAA, and he's teared it up in AAA, at least last season, when he batted .334 with a .949 OPS in 88 games. Cronenworth was ranked as the number 17 prospect for the Rays. He's played mostly second base and third in his career. And hey, Luis Urias, who recently left, he was mostly a second baseman. So maybe not a direct replacement, considering he has no major league experience, but I'd be watching out for this Cronenworth guy. Also, he can pitch. He has over 7 innings under his belt, so maybe the next Lorenzen? Maybe. And going over to Tampa Bay is Xavier Edwards. He's also an infielder, a shortstop to be precise. This guy is 20 years old at the moment. He was played as high as Class A Advanced. And Edwards was a first-round pick of the Padres. He was the team's number 14 prospect. And this guy hits for very high average. He's consistently batted over 300 in his short minor league career. The dude's got great speed, despite a complete lack of power. I'm talking 1 career home run in 168 minor league games, but in that span, he's also smacked 26 doubles, 9 triples, and stolen 56 bases. I love it. You know, remember when this was like every shortstop was a guy who couldn't hit it out of the infield, but was just a speed demon? Yeah, I miss those kind of guys. And now the Rays got one. Well, that wasn't the only move the Padres made, and it wasn't the only move to try and compensate for the trading away of Luis Urias. San Diego also touched down with fellow Californians up in Oakland, and they acquired legendary bust Jurickson Profar in exchange for catcher Austin Allen and a player to be named later. Alright, maybe it's a little unfair to call Profar a bust, but this is a guy who was heavily lauded when the Texas Rangers acquired him. In fact, it was AJ Preller who was in the Rangers front office when they got Profar, and his major league career has been fairly disappointing. He's played a lot of games, hasn't done much, missed some time due to injuries and such. However, in the past 2 seasons, he has turned in year-long campaigns, which is a little reassuring. Profar has just 1 more year under contract with a $5.7 million projected salary. I'm expecting him to enter a timeshare at second base with veteran Ian Kinsler and perhaps maybe this Jake Cronenworth guy. Anyway, Profar, last season he batted .218 with a 711 OPS. He did hit 20 home runs and 24 doubles and 64 RBIs, so not a high average guy, but he can produce. However, his defensive numbers are bad. In 2019, he had -10 defensive runs saved at second, and in 2018, when he was playing shortstop, he had -8 defensive runs. Not a super exciting acquisition, considering his track record, but he does have some power, he does have the speed, and he is at least a placeholder while the Padres find another solution. As for who the A's are getting back, Austin Allen, he's a catcher, he's basically a quadruple A player who's had success at triple A, not so much in the majors. Maybe we'll see him doing some backup work, I don't know. Again, Profar was not very successful in Oakland last year, so I guess they were just trying to get rid of him, and they did. I want to stay in Oakland for a second because they made some moves in relation to the bullpen which bear a little attention. On one hand, they non-tendered Blake Treinen, who is just almost 2 years removed from an all-star season. The guy was a very good closer not too long ago, but struggled in 2019, and there he goes. Meanwhile, the A's brought back left-hander Jake Diekman on a 2-year contract worth $7.5 million. Diekman split 2019 between the A's and the Royals. His numbers were fairly similar with both teams. In total, he had 62 innings under his belt, 4.65 ERA, although with a 3.55 FIP, a WHIP about 1.4, a lot of strikeouts, but a lot of walks. Diekman is an 8-year veteran, and while he's had success in the past, his last 2 seasons he's played with 4 different teams, which is just about telling of his potential meets lack of productivity. Nevertheless, I guess the A's liked what they saw out of him. I'm sure they'll be making some more moves. Whether or not any of them will finally push this team over the ledge, I kind of doubt it given the track record. And a couple more trades to run through. So the Mets went out and acquired outfielder Jake Marisnick from the Astros in exchange for a couple of minor leaguers, left-handed pitcher Blake Taylor and outfielder Kennedy Corona. Marisnick basically serves as a replacement for the failed Juan Lagares. Marisnick, not necessarily a good hitter. He batted .233 last season with a 700 OPS, both of which were above his career averages. 29 extra base hits, 10 steals. However, Marisnick's main worth has to do with his glove. This guy had 5+ defensive runs saved last season out of center field, which is, of course, the hardest outfield position to play. He's got 1 more year left on his contract, projected to earn $3 million in arbitration. Fairly affordable. Maybe they can platoon him or something, I'm not sure. Of course, the Mets are still waiting for Yoenis Cespedes to come back from the dead, which might never happen. So, not a bad acquisition necessarily. And again, it's an upgrade over who they had in center field last season. And I was expecting the Astros to move either Marisnick or Josh Reddick, given their deep outfield. Now, as for what the Houston Cheaters are getting in return, lefty Blake Taylor has pitched as high as Double-A, where he's posted some pretty good numbers, very good numbers in fact, and he's continuing that success right now in the Arizona Fall League, so maybe we'll see Blake Taylor coming out of the Astros bullpen next season. Whereas outfielder Kennedy Corona, who has made it to Class A, though has played the bulk of his baseball in rookie ball, where he's done very good as well, about a 300 hitter. So a couple of intriguing prospects to get for getting rid of one of many outfielders the Astros have. I'm kind of inclined to give this W to Houston. Meanwhile, over in Milwaukee, the Brewers made a flurry of moves. They non-tendered a couple regulars. Infielder Travis Shaw, who granted was terrible at the plate last season, right-hander Jimmy Big Sweat Nelson, who really struggled in 2019 after missing all of 2018 due to injury. And they also non-tendered a couple relievers, Alex Claudio and Junior Guerra. I'm kind of surprised they non-tendered Guerra because he didn't really find much success as a starter, but after moving to the pen in 2019, he did put up all-right numbers. I can see why now that I'm looking at him a little closer. But yeah, quite a turnover for the Brewers, a team that already has lost Moustakas and Grandal to free agency. And a team with a lot of questions considering the injuries they suffered last season to some of their key players, as well as kind of a weird pitching staff, particularly considering their rotation. Well, the Brewers have at least made a move to replace Grandal. They've pulled off a trade with the Seattle Mariners to acquire Omar Narvaez in exchange for right-hander Adam Hill and a competitive balance draft pick. Narvaez is a consistent hitter. His career batting average is .276 to go along with a career on-baser of .361, and he's pretty well posted numbers similar to that in each of his last few seasons. 2019 was Narvaez's biggest year, statistically, including in games played. He smacked 22 home runs and 55 RBIs. He profiles as a left-handed batter who's really good against righties, which you gotta like. However, Narvaez is not so good behind the plate. He's considered an average framer, and his other metrics are shit. In 2019, Narvaez threw out 18% of base stealers. He had negative 20 defensive runs saved. Regardless, as I said, Narvaez can hit. He is under contract for 3 more seasons, which is nice. He's projected to earn just $2.9 million next season, and he can form a tandem with Manny Pina, who is a much better defensive catcher. As for the Mariners, they're going to be rolling with Tom Murphy at catcher next season, now with Narvaez gone, which is completely fine considering, at least in 2019, Murphy had a far better season in all respects than Narvaez, and not like this is a huge deal for a Mariners team that's in the middle of a rebuild. As for who they're getting in return, Adam Hill, minor league right-hander, 22 years old, out of Anderson, South Carolina, has pitched as high as Class A, hasn't done all that well, but hey, it's a depth prospect essentially, and a competitive round balance, draft pick, whatever. It's like basically a second rounder. Not a bad deal for shipping off a catcher who they didn't really need. I'll be interested to see if the Brewers make any other moves, particularly in relation to pitching. They're not a team that's used to spending a lot of money, but they really could use some help. I feel like their window is closing. Meanwhile, 2 bottom-of-the-league teams have been very busy in this past week, pulling off a bunch of trades. The Miami Marlins and the Baltimore Orioles have both been fairly active. In fact, they had a trade between themselves. The Orioles are sending infielder Jonathan Villar to Miami in exchange for minor league left-hander Easton Lucas. This is kind of weird because, yeah, the Marlins lost over 100 games last season. I didn't think they would be like, yeah, all right, let's start getting guys. But, let's take a look at the facts here. Villar has just 1 more year on his contract, and though he's projected to earn $10.4 million, the Marlins could definitely afford that. And if he continues to play like he did last year, then Villar could be a really good trade chip. Last season, he batted .274 with a .792 OPS. He hit 24 home runs, 33 doubles, 73 RBIs, and stole 40 bases, although he did strike out 176 times. Villar will probably replace Starlin Castro over at second base. They also got to consider the fact the Marlins have prospect Isan Diaz kind of in the majors. The guy the Orioles are getting in return, this Easton Lucas character, his numbers don't really jump off the page. He's a 23-year-old left-hander out of Thousand Oaks, California. And the other move the Marlins made was claiming Jesus Aguilar off waivers from the Rays. It's an interesting one because if you remember, Aguilar had an excellent 2018, and then last season he returned to being a not-so-spectacular player. He split 2019 between Milwaukee and Tampa Bay, and while he struggled with the Brewers, he kind of turned things around with the Rays. In 37 games, he batted .261 with a .760 OPS. There are some chances he can kind of, turn things around And he's got time to do so because he's got 3 more years left on his contract. Projected to earn just $2.5 million in arbitration. Super affordable, super low risk move for the Marlins. And if he does rekindle his career, trade chip. Aguilar has played almost exclusively at first base, which is a bit of an issue because the Marlins have Garrett Cooper over there, and he's coming off a good year. But they'll figure it out somehow. And just one last little word about the Marlins. I mean, yeah, they were terrible last season, but there's some really good young talent on this team, not just in the minors, but in the majors already. Their top 3 guys in WAR are all 26 or younger. They got some interesting dudes there, like third baseman Brian Anderson, pitcher Sandy Alcantara, their shortstop Miguel Rojas, and catcher Jorge Alfaro. All of them had good years last year. So while they'll probably continue to play poor baseball in 2020, don't completely go to sleep on the Marlins. But shifting back to Baltimore for a second, because they did make another trade, and they shipped out right-handed starter Dylan Bundy over to Anaheim in exchange for 4 pitching prospects. This is an interesting one because on one hand, the Angels are notoriously desperate for starting pitching. In 2019, the Angels had 8 pitchers clock in more than 10 starts. Only 3 of those guys had an ERA below 5, and one of those guys is dead. No shocker here that they went out and got Bundy. Kind of unfortunate they had to give up 4 prospects for him, but for a team that already has an unreasonably high payroll, I guess this is the move they made. Bundy has 2 more years left in arbitration, so at least I'll have him around for his quick second. In 4 Major League seasons, the once highly regarded Bundy has a .467 career ERA and a .475 FIP, 1.33 WHIP. Does have a strikeout per inning, but he gives up a lot of home runs. But again, anything is an improvement over what the Angels were fielding on the mound last season. I gotta give this W here to the Orioles because a couple of the guys that they acquired in this trade are kind of interesting. Kyle Bradish, 23-year-old righty out of Arizona. He was actually, he is now the 25th ranked prospect in the Orioles system. He's pitched as high as Class A advanced, and while he hasn't done great there, there's clearly some hype around this guy. As for someone who has performed, 24-year-old righty Isaac Mattson, who has pitched as high as AAA, who's had good numbers at that level as well as AA, and he's currently pitching pretty well in the Arizona Fall League. So who knows, maybe we'll see Isaac Mattson in the majors next season. Not to mention there's 2 other guys the Orioles got for Bundy, who's basically a back-end starter with only 2 years left of control. Yeah, I think the Orioles actually managed to win this trade. Now there's one more big signing that I haven't mentioned up to this date because segue purposes, and that is left-handed starting pitcher Cole Hamels is taking his talents to Atlanta on a 1-year, $18 million deal. Hamels is soon to be 36 years old, so a 1-year contract was expected. $18 million seems like kind of high for him, but he did manage to rejuvenate his career in 2018 when he was traded from Texas to Chicago. Ever since joining the Cubs, he posted really good numbers. In 218 innings in a Cubs uniform, he had a .330 ERA and a strikeout per inning. He was really good in 2018 after that trade. He was decent in 2019 until late June when he hurt his oblique. He missed a month. He came back and he was bad at pretty much the worst time to struggle because the Cubs as a whole just tanked at the end of last season. Some stats to back that up, I guess. In 2019, before his injury, Hamels had a .298 ERA and a 1.2 WHIP. After, he had a .579 ERA and a 1.83 WHIP. So there's a bit of assumption here that recovered from his injury, Hamels is going to go back to being a good middle of the rotation starter. And that's great news for the Braves, a team that is losing Keuchel and Tehran to free agency and whose starting pitching is highly reliant on youth. Max Fried and Calgary's very own Mike Soroka had great 2019 campaigns, but as often happens, hitters find out what these guys are all about, and they come back with a vengeance the very next season. So bringing in a guy who is a sturdy veteran and a great clubhouse guy like Cole Hamels is a nice move for the Braves. They're up to $132.7 million in payroll for next season, which again is going to rise as they pay out arbitrations and probably make some more moves. And they've spent a lot of money on pitchers already with all those relievers they signed this past month. But hey, they needed a starter. They're probably not going to go after the big guys, so getting a dude like Hamels, good move for Atlanta. And of course, Hamels, a former Cub, you know what that means. We got to shift gears over to CUBSCAST and talk about what's going on with them Cubby Bears. I guess the biggest news, Addison Russell got non-tendered, but that was like a foregone conclusion. We all freaking knew he was leaving. According to Jeff Passan, ESPN dude, the Cubs are trying to trade Wilson Contreras, Kyle Schwarber, Chris Bryant, etc. We knew this, but other teams are describing the Cubs' efforts as motivated, yeah, aggressive, okay, obvious, no shit, and manic. That's it's interesting takes from other executives. I don't know if they're just trying to throw Theo and company under the bus and put pressure on them, but it sounds a little desperate. And you know what? I'm okay with the Cubs trading one of these guys as much as I like them. Something needs to change, but god damn it, Theo, don't make a trade out of desperation. It's gonna go badly. Because, hey, listen, let's not forget about when the Cubs were making those late season pushes. Aroldis Chapman, a half-year rental. Top prospect, Gleyber Torres, gone. Jose Quintana, a middle-of-the-rotation guy with a few years of team control left on a, good money options. Eloy Jimenez, top prospect, gone. Dylan Cease, rare Cubs pitching prospect, gone. Quintana has regressed since that trade. Why? Because he's not pitching in the AL Comedy Central anymore. And those two trades are constantly at the source of criticism of this Cubs front office. However, do you want to cast a little light, throw a little optimism in the mix? What about that Daniel Murphy trade? What about that Nicholas Castellanos trade? Can you even name who we gave up for those two guys? I can't, because they were nobodies. And those are two really good hitters that the Cubs acquired at the past two trade deadlines. Two trades that happened after the Quintana and Chapman debacles. So, if you want to talk recency, I have a little bit of faith in Epstein and Hoyer to get a good deal. But it's got to be a blockbuster. It's got to be a thick, meaty package. It's got to be impact players. It's got to be starting pitchers. It's got to be relief pitchers. It's got to be pitching prospects. It's got to be, I don't freaking know. And you know what? Apparently the Cubs are still trying to sign Castellanos. And I love that. Because I think Castellanos is a really good hitter. Not just from what I saw of him last season as a Cub, but from how he was playing in Detroit prior to that. He was hitting very well in a pitcher-friendly park. So if they can get this guy a deal, do it. If that means trading Schwarber, I will always respect him. Well, the Cubby Bears have made one signing, and that's Dan Winkler. All right, we got the free agent pitchers coming in. You know it was going to happen. Dan Winkler. Oh, man. This guy who's played the parts of the past 5 seasons in Atlanta. In 100 career innings, he has a 3.68 ERA with a 3.65 FIP. More than 10 strikeouts per 9, which I like. 1.176 whip and 3.5 walks per inning. It's not great, but not awful either. Winkler did not have a really good 2019. His ERA was just at about 5. His FIP was even higher than that. So there is some skepticism warranted. However, Winkler is a pretty low cost, 1 year, $750,000 deal. For basically a depth piece, and considering how many relievers the Cubs are standing to lose to free agency this hot stove, hey, do it. Let's just freaking do it. Actually, my main concern with Winkler is he has a bit of a concerning injury history. He's pitched more than 21 major league innings in a season just once in his 5-year career. So, yeah, I'm not super excited about this, but this guy has had some success in the past. In fact, that one season where he did pitch 60-plus innings was pretty decent. So, hey, you know what? Whatever. Let's wait for the winter meetings and wait for one of these big boys to get shipped out. And as I mentioned, Addison Russell got non-tendered, completely to be expected. He had a bad year on the field, at the plate, off the field. I honestly don't know if Addison Russell will play in the major leagues again, at least not for the time being, because the social climate around domestic violence is very attentive, is very sensitive, and considering the bad press the major leagues has had to deal with in regards to Herrera, in regards to Felipe Vasquez, I don't know if teams are willing to take a risk on a guy like Russell who's not even played well since basically his rookie year. And just a couple of more deals I wanted to go over. The Twins are bringing back right-hander starter Michael Pineda on a 2-year, $20 million deal. Pineda has had one of the more tumultuous careers I've ever seen. Came in as a well-regarded prospect, was an all-star in his rookie season, then got hurt so many times he missed 3 full seasons due to injury. His 2019 in Minnesota was perhaps his best since that rookie year, and even then he managed a 4.01 ERA and a 4.02 FIP through 146 innings, in which he did strike out 140 guys and walk just 26. So there are some positives there, but even in 2019, he missed some time due to injury. Looking like a sturdy mid to maybe back of the rotation piece, but hey, the Twins, they need all the help they can get. They already lost Michael, they already lost Kyle Gibson, did retain Jake Odorizzi. Why not bring back Pineda, I guess? $10 million a year. You know what, if he can build on what he did last season, even post the same numbers, I think the Twins would be satisfied with him as like their number 4 guy. But at the moment, he's more like their number 3. So watch for the Twins to maybe add another starter. Meanwhile, the defending champion Washington Nationals are bringing back infielder Howie Kendrick on a 1-year, $6.25 million deal. No surprise here on the length. Kendrick is going to be 37 next summer, but this guy is just still playing so well into his old age. In the last 3 seasons, he's managed a batting average above 300 and an OPS above 800 with fairly good consistency. In 2019, he also had 41 extra base hits and 62 RBIs. He's got an average glove, but for a guy who can play on the right side of the infield with such a good bat, $6.25 million, that is a good value. Maybe he took a loyalty discount or something, because hey, the Nationals are losing a couple big free agents. They're probably going to add some more guys from around the roster, particularly with their bullpen, not to mention potential replacements for Rendon and Strasburg. So with such a small money contract for Kendrick, saving money for some other additions. Meanwhile, the Twins also got a new catcher in Alex Avila on a 1-year, $4.25 million deal. Twins are set to lose Jason Castro to free agency. They do have Mitch Garver, who's coming off of a pretty good season, particularly at the plate, though his defense needs some work. That means Avila would actually be a good complementary piece. He hasn't done so well at the plate. High strikeout guy, though he also takes a lot of walks. The past 2 seasons in Arizona, he's batted under 200 with an on-base percentage under 300, and that's with a lot of walks. He is a good catcher, however. In those past 2 seasons, he has 13 defensive runs saved. He's considered an above-average framer, and he throws out a lot of base runners. So pairing him with the more offensively geared Garver, nice little deal for the Twins. And finally, the Mets re-signed right-handed relief pitcher Brad Brock on a 1-year contract worth under $1 million with an option. Brock is not the same guy he used to be in Baltimore. Came over to the Cubs, didn't do too well, ended up getting traded to the Mets. And after that trade, he did fare better, although at a small sample size of 14 1/3 innings. But those Medis, yikes. But they did make a couple moves this past week, bringing back Brock and trading for Marisnik. And before I wrap things up, I want to introduce a brand new segment that I just created called Something Cool or Interesting That I Learned About Baseball or Saw That Was Baseball Related in the Past Week. And Gary Sheffield, anybody who grew up a baseball fan in the 90s or early 2000s, know the guy. He's currently 51 years old, and he's still got it. A video has emerged of him at some random local field, hoodie on, hood on, cigar in his mouth, still knocking it out of the park. Go check it out. And you know what? Bring this guy in for that All-Star Celebrity Baseball softball game they have every year, and have him smoke that cigar while he hits softballs out of the park. We would all love that. I guess a couple more Cubs notes. Well, just one really. Apparently the Cubs are talking to the deceased Brandon Morrow on a minor league deal. Listen, for a minor league deal, fine, sign the guy, but the dude is so hurt. He threw less than 31 innings over 2 seasons, in which he was paid how much friggin' money? Over $10 million a year? It's garbage. I don't know. Maybe the Cubs know a little something we don't with how he was developing and rehabbing towards the end of the season. Again, on a minor league deal, it's so low cost, low risk, might as well. But I'm not totally thrilled about seeing Morrow come back and occupy a 40-man roster spot or anything like that, but we'll have to see. But that's it for this program. Stoveminders, keep on minding that stove. Winter meetings are just around the corner in just a few days, 3 days to be exact. This Monday, December 9th. Going on from Monday to Thursday. Next week is going to be crazy. Expecting some big deals and big trades going down in San Diego. But for now, my name is Irrelevant, and I'm out.